Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 42 of Blake&VishSports. Sports. This episode, we're coming a day after the NBA championship, so it's all over now. The Milwaukee Bucks have won. And then other big news for Vish's team, they extended Fred Warner, who is the starting middle linebacker. Some say best in the league. Some say otherwise. I think everyone thinks he's top 3 or top 5. That's kind of universally thought, but that's the big news that's coming out today. So we wanted to cover a little NFL and NBA. But Vish, how are you doing? How are your initial reactions watching the game last night?
Thought it was crazy. Honestly, one of the great. I'm actually going to go as far as to say it's the greatest performance in a closeout finals game I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like Giannis actually just took that game over. I mean, we're obviously going to talk a little bit more about it. But yeah, crazy game.
Mm-hmm.
Giannis shooting 17 for 19 from the free throw line was shocking. Just props to him. He's a really good dude, and he deserved this championship. All the Bucks did. Chris Middleton, I thought he had up and down playoffs. He had moments where he looked like a prime Kobe, where he's scoring 40 in a big game 4 on a big game 4, and then he had moments where he was shooting 4 for 16. But Giannis's consistency, and I thought it was really cool, and it was nice to see that a small market team can win, especially knowing that the Pistons got something cooking and that they might be in this situation of I'm just playing, but yeah, it's nice to see a small market team win.
Definitely. And they're not even like the smallest market. They're just not like LA, Chicago,
Yeah,
New York.
San
Pretty much
Francisco.
those 3.
Yeah.
Pretty much those 3. But awesome. Yeah, let's get started with the first topic of your 49ers. So Fred Warner signed a 5-year, $95 million extension, $40 million guaranteed. The breakout's a little interesting because the first few years the cap hit isn't bad, and then after a while, that's when it kind of starts kicking in. I feel like the Niners do that a lot, though. I mean, I could be wrong here, but I want to say they did that with Kittle as well, kind of pushing his down the road.
And
Did
Eric
they do
Armstead
as well.
Yep.
And then Trent Williams was the guy who I think his is kind of the opposite. His is more front loaded, I want to say.
If I remember correctly, I'm not looking at his contract right now. He had a lot of guaranteed money up front, but
That's
they
what it was,
backloaded his cap hits as well.
Okay, it was
So I think
the guaranteed was a lot up front. Like I think if you cut him, it'd be like 40 or it'd be an obscene amount of dead cap like the first year or two.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I want to get your thoughts on this, Vish. What did you think about the deal, and what are your like main takeaways from this Fred Warner extension?
So obviously this was something that needed to happen this offseason for the 49ers. I mean, I must say I was slightly worried about it. Not that I didn't think they could get it done. I just wanted to get it done quickly because this is one of those things that you don't want lingering. I mean, Fred Warner, he's started every single game since he's come in the NFL, 48 straight starts. He's as good a linebacker as there is in football. He's, in my opinion, the best one in coverage. I can understand if you want a more physical linebacker because, there are a few guys like Darius Leonard, Bobby Wagner that are a tad more physical than my man Fred Warner, but he's as good in coverage as it gets. He's good in man, he's good in zone, he's really smart. He's the leader of the 49ers defense. He was the leader of a defense that, in spite of having injuries all over their defensive line, all over their secondary, they were the 5th best defense in football. A lot of that was because they had Fred Warner as their middle linebacker. So the accolades with Fred Warner is like, yeah, he's one of the 2 or 3. I think he's the best, but he's one of the 2 or 3 best guys at his position in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. But I think the important detail, and I know you're going to get into the details of the contract a bit more and your thoughts on that, so I'll let you go for that in just a second. But to me, the most important thing was the fact that they signed Fred Warner before Roquan Smith got his deal and before Darius Leonard got his deal. I personally think Fred Warner is a superior football player to the 2 of them, but I think that this is one of those situations that all 3 are kind of in the same conversation where the player that got signed last was going to get the most money. And the 49ers first reset the market with Fred Warner. And however expensive this deal with Fred Warner looks right now, it's not going to look that expensive 2 months from now because the Roquan Smith and the Darius Leonard deal are most likely going to eclipse this by a tad amount. Fred Warner obviously was able to eclipse Bobby Wagner. So I think from that standpoint, that to me was my biggest takeaway. Like the 49ers, Pragma, they're really good at getting contracts done, and it's really nice that they were able to get this contract done first.
Yeah, I'm with you with the getting the contract done first because you save yourself money, right? And
Right.
I think there's two different views on this, and some teams will do like a contract like middle of the season and extend them way early. And I feel like in that times, like it can sometimes come back to bite them because if the guy maybe they overjudged how good he was. If they give him a contract, before the season and he ends up not being as good as they thought he'd be, that's an issue. But it was after the season. He's continued to play great. I know their yards are top 5. Would you say they were a top 5 defense last year? I know that's how their yards metrics were. I know their points were like 16th. Their points were middle of the pack.
Yeah, and I think the points, to be fair on the points, I would say if I wouldn't call them, a top 5 defense. I think there were a couple of defenses lower than them that I would maybe put ahead of them.
Yeah.
They were ranked 5th in terms of yards. I still thought they were, bar none, a top 10 defense. I think the point stat is a little misleading because they were put in a few bad spots because their offense did turn the football over quite a bit. They did have Nick Mullins, who did have a very turnover-prone season while playing quarterback. So from that standpoint, I think the points is a little bit misleading. I think the yards is also maybe a little bit less than what it should be because they did play Dwayne Haskins for an entire half, and he couldn't move the ball in half an inch that entire half. So I think that helped. So overall, I would say if you had to rank them based on who they had last year in the defense they had with Saleh calling the plays, somewhere 7 to 10 to me is fair.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not to say that their defense is like bad, but yeah, they still had an above average defense, right? And he's the main reason for that, I would say. Because you mentioned the injuries and what that'll do, but he helps make up for it. And I just wanted to get into one thing too that I kind of noticed. And that's with like the scheme, like running a cover 3, like the Seattle scheme, right? Your linebackers need to be good in coverage because there's a lot of pressure on them to be excellent. And with Seattle, it worked because Bobby Wagner's Bobby Wagner. He's been an All-Pro for the whole decade, pretty much, from what it seems.
KJ Wright's really good in coverage.
Yeah, and it's only 2 of them, so they're relying a lot on like how good they can be in that scheme. So I think that goes to show like the fact that they can run that defense successfully. If your linebackers aren't good in coverage, it won't work. It's really that simple. So he allows them to do that and do it at an extremely good level. The next point I wanted to bring up was kind of an interesting point, and it's not to be negative on it, but I just thought this was more interesting than anything. When you break down the average amount each linebacker is paid and just the defenses that they're on, it's pretty weird because, linebacker's not, I guess, considered a premium position. Usually you would say edge or cornerback or tackle or quarterback. Those are like the considered quote unquote premium positions, but just here's the highest linebackers average value per year. So Warner's first at 18.5, Wagner 18, CJ Mosley 17, Zach Cunningham 14.5, Miles Jack 14.25, Deion Jones 14.25, and then Corey Littleton 11.75. I just found it interesting how most of these defenses are like average at best. Like I don't think any of those defenses are top 10. And that to me was interesting in thinking, like you would think like, if you have a really good linebacker that can cover for other areas. And I guess, having the highest paid one doesn't mean your linebacker is good, right? Like some of those guys aren't top 5 linebackers. But yeah, I just thought that little tidbit was interesting when looking at it, and kind of like how Wagner and Warner are like $4 million above the next guy, which is like a lot, obviously, but they're just that good. So, you have to pay them what the market demands. So I just thought that was interesting. But yeah, I'm with you for the most part on they had to get this done. You don't let players of his caliber walk, all pro players, because they don't grow on trees, especially at the linebacker position. I feel like over the years, linebacker has been one of those positions where if you don't have a good one, yours is probably not all that good. Like there's a fine line between a good linebacker and a bad linebacker. And with offense becoming more complex with all the play action and all like, the pre-snap movements, it makes having a linebacker that doesn't get tricked by that stuff even the more valuable. So that's just like my 2 cents on it. And I think linebacker is becoming a more premium position as the years go on, because you look at the defenses with good linebackers. I mean, you saw what the Buccaneers did with two of some of the best. So just goes to show.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I wanted to touch on your point about, the linebacker market growing. I think CJ Mosley, so Miles Jack, Deion Jones were the two that got signed, I think, before 2019. I
Yes.
think CJ Mosley was signed as a free agent that offseason. So obviously that his contract is skewed by that. And then Bobby, I feel like, got extended one more time very recently.
His third contract. This is his third contract.
And it was very recent. He did it as his own agent and all of that. Just for reference, because you talked about how linebacker is becoming more of a premium position and how much the market is growing. So, for example, Fred Warner has made one All-Pro team and one Pro Bowl so far. That's his, I guess, in terms of accolades. It's not everything, but I think it does have something to do with contract negotiations, just because it's something you can point to. Like, this is something I achieved. Like, it's part of it. Well, at this same point in his career, when he signed his second contract, Patrick Willis had made four straight Pro Bowls and was a 3-time first-team All-Pro in 4 years. Do you know what Patrick Willis's extension was? And this was in 2011.
Probably like half of it. Like,
yeah, it was 5 years.
Cap was way different at that point too.
Right, he made 5 years, $50 million with $20.3 million guaranteed. That was his contract. So an average about 10. That's crazy because Fred Warner doubled his contract. Well, Navarro Bowman comes along, 2012. He was an first-team All-Pro in 2011. He gets his first contract extension. He was 5 years, $45 million with $16.67 million guaranteed. To me, it's just crazy how much the market is growing. And you talked about how it's becoming more of a premium position. Well, yeah, it seems to be that way because we talked about it earlier, right? Fred Warner's the first of Tremaine Edmonds, Roquan Smith, Darius Leonard. All of these guys are going to get paid in some capacity. Now, not all of them are going to touch Fred Warner's deal, but they're going to be right there, right near
him. Right
there,
I think.
Right, they're going to.
Because they're, if you're top 5, top 8 at your position, you get paid like your top 3. That's just how the market works. You reset the market if you're that good.
Right. And not to mention, you talked about the average annual salary, how there's a drop-off. You go Fred Warner, Bobby Wagner, CJ Mosley, and then you go down to Zach Cunningham, that $4 million drop-off. Yeah. They're about to fill that gap, I think.
Yeah, they'll be I think they'll be just right. Like, I can honestly see Leonard being the highest paid when he gets his contract up. Because he does have the accolades, right?
Right.
Yeah, it'll be
Roquan Smith will probably be maybe like 17, 18 million. Tremaine Edmonds, I think, will be the guy that's 15
he'll be the filler
16.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, it's crazy how the linebacker market is growing. And it's really simple because you talked about it. You have to have linebackers that can cover in space in today's NFL. If you don't have those guys, you're basically screwed because a lot of teams, like, it's not just the Seattle scheme, right? They play a lot of quarters defenses, a lot of defenses with split safety. Well, you need linebackers that can cover a lot of ground and be able to flip their hips and take people in man when they have to, zone, everything. And so because of that, we're seeing that off-ball linebackers are a big necessity. You need to have a fast one unless you're the Green Bay Packers and, you prefer to have these old school thumpers and 6th round, 7th round picks. But that's a conversation for another day.
Well, see, what I find weird, though, is, like the Packers clearly don't value that position. A team like the Eagles didn't really value that position. And when they went on their Super Bowl run, it's not like the linebacker was their best position. They were a front 4 team. Their defensive line was great, but they still had great contributions from like Nigel Bradham, and Malcolm Jenkins would slide into that role. And then you think of the Chiefs from last year. They didn't have a great or really good inside linebacker. It was
really bad, actually.
They had Sorensen, right? So
Sorensen and Hitchens, yeah.
Yeah, like I guess you can live without one, but it makes everything a lot easier when you do have one. I mean, you look at defenses that have had like Luke Kuechly, that have had Bobby Wagner, that have had Ray Lewis. Like, those defenses seem to always be at least like average. Like bar none, they will always be average. Now there's other good guys on that team, like don't get me wrong, but they can fix a lot of the issues that, other guys have. And I think it's interesting hearing quarterbacks when they're at the line and hearing stories about how like they'll call an audible, and Luke Kuechly or Brian Urlacher will instantly call an audible knowing what it is, telling them, it's a run right or it's a run left and stuff like that. Like just how much of an impact that one person has on knowing what the offense is doing is just incredible.
Yeah, it's really awesome, and I think Fred Warner can eventually be one of those guys
Yeah.
if he continues on this arc over the next 4 or 5 years. So I'm really excited to see it. And again, it was a deal they had to get done, and I'm very glad they did get it done.
Agreed. But pushing away from the NFL, we can go to some more recent events. And that's the Milwaukee Bucks winning the NBA Finals, stop the 50-year drought when they had Oscar and Kareem, well before our lifetimes. They've had some good years in between when, Michael Redd was really good a little bit there. They had the Brandon Jennings days when he was on the team, and they were pretty exciting. Monta Ellis, yes, of course. But yeah, they really got turned around by Giannis. But Vish, what are your thoughts on this overall run? And yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool for them to actually go and make and win the championship. Honestly, full disclosure, I was one of those guys who didn't believe in them. I didn't believe specifically in specific things in Giannis's game. He proved me wrong. I didn't believe in Coach Bud. I don't think he proved me wrong, but he won a championship, so I can't say anything wrong about the man. I didn't believe in the style of basketball the Milwaukee Bucks played, especially with how reliant they were on shooting a lot of inefficient threes. But again, they managed to pull it off. So I was wrong on all accounts because they did manage to win the ring. I do think they were aided a little bit by Kyrie Irving's injury and James Harden's injury and Kevin Durant's foot being 6 inches, in front of on the 3-point line. But honestly, I don't think those things matter. Like, sure, you can be aided by it. Well, they still had to go beat the Hawks in 6 and then ultimately beat the Suns in 6. And they did it. Giannis had one of the greatest finals ever. I don't think it's being internalized, honestly, how great his finals is. I think it's going to be one of those things, and we do this in the NBA a lot, where we're going to look at this box score of Giannis's finals 4 years from now and go, wow, that's the greatest finals ever. Like, how are we not talking about it then? But for whatever reason, it's not being perceived like that. So I don't know why. It is really one of the greatest finals performances ever, especially for him. The way he played game 1 and game 2 when it looked like his knee was still bothering him, for him to score 40 something in game 2. And really all he needed was one of Chris Middleton or Drew Holiday to have a fairly decent game and they win game 2 in Phoenix. Then game 3 and game 4 for him to once again play great. But game 4, Chris Middleton was absolutely incredible. Game 5, they all played well. Giannis was once again terrific. And then, like I said before, the greatest closeout game performance I've ever seen from any player. Giannis was in the finals. Giannis last night, it was special. What he achieved was incredible. The Milwaukee Bucks defense, I think, hasn't been talked about enough. It's not just Giannis with those amazing blocks and his health defense and his effort. It's Drew Holiday at the point of attack. I'm not a big fan of this guy. I think he gets away with a lot of fouls. I think he fouls way too much. But I thought he was maybe the most underrated player throughout their finals run, and that was PJ Tucker. One of the biggest problems Milwaukee's had the last couple of years is they've been unable to guard very good wings. They struggled to guard Jimmy Butler in the bubble. They struggled with Kawhi Leonard 2 years ago. And PJ Tucker, to me, helped that. I think he troubled Kevin Durant at the very least, even though Kevin Durant was still dropping 48 on his head because he's Kevin Durant. So I think that he was actually very helpful. Pat Connaughton's offensive rebounding, like somehow that guy always had like 9 rebounds with 5 of them being offensive. Yeah. So honestly, like, I don't know what else to say except for the fact that, like, props to the Bucks. Milwaukee deserves it, and Giannis deserves it. And I honestly was wrong about the Bucks and Giannis.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I was with you. I didn't think they would do it. I I honestly thought like against the Nets, I didn't think they could pull it out. I mean, Harden went down and Kyrie went down, and that hurt him a lot. But still, going to 7 games and doing what they did in overtime, Kevin Durant didn't play particularly great in that segment. I think that's due to obvious fatigue and their defense just kind of stepping it up a notch. And then I think this finals they kind of proved how resilient they were because we forget the narrative when the Suns were up 2-0, like everyone was calling this over, and not many were giving the Bucks a chance to win. But they rattled off 4 in a row, and I know you mentioned Coach Bud and whether he deserved credit. It's crazy because if they lose to the Nets, he's gone. It's that simple. I thought the last 2 series he made great adjustments. Just overall, I mean, being down 2-0 in the finals, you can't just keep doing the same thing. I think changes were made, and how they played defense was definitely one of them. And having Drew picking up CP3 full court and kind of wearing him down was a huge thing with that. With
Yeah,
what they did, and I do agree with you. I don't know how good Coach Bud is. I think they had the superior team. I'll say that they did what they had to do because we can say all we want about the Suns and how great of a season they had, but I solemnly think that the Bucks' big three is definitely like undeniably better than the Suns' big three. Giannis is
I
clearly the
agree.
best of the bunch. Um, Booker might be the next guy, the next best
I,
player, but
I don't know if Booker is better than Chris Middleton. I'm going to be totally honest. I think
really
I take the superior 3-point shooter. Like Devin Booker to me,
interesting.
like a lot of people compare Devin Booker to Kobe. I'm just gonna say right now, Devin Booker's not a 3-level scorer. He's not as good as Kobe or other 3-level scorers at the rim. He's not as good as in an in-game. I mean, he's won 3-point contests. He's not as good an in-game 3-point shooter either. He's a 2-point jump shooter. I think the best comparison for him is if DeMar DeRozan and Paul Pierce had a baby and then you souped him up
Mm,
with a little more athleticism and a lift on his jump shot, you have Devin Booker. I don't know, but I had to
interesting.
just say that. My bad.
No, you're good. I mean, I don't know. I haven't even thought about. I would probably take Booker because I think Booker's just a better scorer overall. And if Booker wasn't the best player on his team, what would he be? That would be insane to
True.
think about. But yeah, like the long-winded thing is, I still think the Bucks' big three is better, and I think this. They had to win this, right? I think
Hmm.
in every single series they had the superior team. Specifically considering the Nets were injured. Now, I hate saying that, but it is a caveat because this Nets team took them to 7. And that was largely with just Kevin Durant, just one guy for most of it. So that's
Right.
crazy to think about. And I think that puts into perspective how good they are. Because you talk about not having Kyrie. Harden played, that was not Harden. That was a one-legged hobbled Harden. And the fact that
That
they
was
took
bad.
them to 7 to the very end says a lot to me about how good that Nets team really was. If the Bucks can rattle off 4 in a row against the Suns, I think they should beat the Hawks. They're just further along in the process. But I am happy for them because I will say this myself, you, and a lot of others did doubt this team. We doubted Chris Middleton. We doubted Giannis, doubted Drew Holiday, doubted Bud, and they did enough to win. And I think your point about Giannis is right. 2 40-point games, a 50-point game, and a closeout. I know some people on sports media, like Nick Wright or others, have claimed like how great this is and Giannis is the best player and all that, but I feel like if this was Kevin Durant or LeBron who put up the same exact stat line, we'd be talking about it differently, or most people would be talking about it differently. Because there have been some people that have said how great it's been,
Yeah.
but I feel like for the most part, it's not being talked about. Like if you put another, maybe more familiar face that's been on these high pressure stages, like in the championship and whatnot, people would care about it more. I
Absolutely.
truly believe that.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Kevin Durant. The reason I'm not ready to go with best player in the NBA to with Giannis is because of that head-to-head series. And to me, Kevin Durant looked the best player in that
I
series
agree.
far. And that's where I say, well, like, I don't want to, like, obviously Milwaukee showed incredible resilience. They were down 2-0 against the Nets, and that game 3 was a grind out ball game that they won.
Mhm.
They did have a 2-2 series versus the Hawks, and they did blow game 1 at home, and Ice Trae gave them 48, and they did come back from that. And then same thing with the NBA Finals. They were down 2-0, and they came back. They went 4 straight in terms of winning the finals. Like, all of that is really impressive. There should be nothing taken away from what the Bucks did. But at the same time, there is a little bit part of me that just wants to imagine what it would have been like if Kyrie Irving never gets hurt. Just because,
Mhm.
again, like, it's so easy, especially you look at how historic Giannis is. Finals was, how great he was on both ends of the court. And you're like, yeah, this was one of the most special performances ever. He's automatically the best player in the NBA. But then how easily we forget what Kevin Durant was doing. And
Exactly.
Kevin Durant was really giving people buckets. And I would say that honestly, the Suns did a poor job, if you want to talk about the Suns, defending Giannis. I think putting DeAndre Ayton on him in isolation and letting him gain a head of steam, like, that's not the wall. They never, ever collapsed on Giannis in the paint. DeAndre Ayton had a very poor series. I think that I was one of those people who overrated him a little bit when he was really dominating Ivica Zubac and Andre Drummond. He had a very good series against Nikola Jokic, but Nikola Jokic was also overmatched in terms of his team against the Suns. I overrated him a little bit. He's still a really talented player and
He
a very
is.
good one. But I think that when you're talking about the contract that DeAndre Ayton might garner this offseason, I don't think it should be in the max conversation. You've been very vocal to me on just our phone calls over these playoffs that he isn't deserving of that. I agree. I thought he played, I don't want to use the word soft, but I thought he played timid in the finals. I thought, I mean, he's a 7'1", 260-pound guy, and I thought he was shying away from the contact that Giannis and Brook Lopez were providing. Not just Giannis giving him buckets. Like, Giannis is going to eventually give everybody
Yeah,
buckets. You can make it
exactly.
tougher on him, which the Suns didn't do a good job of, but he's going to give you buckets. It's on defense. Like, he's got a 4-foot bunny right in front of the rim when Devin Booker's throwing it to him, and he's fading away and not going into Giannis's body and into Brook Lopez's body. So I thought that was a problem, and I thought the way they defended Giannis. And then real quick, before you go, my bad, I just wanted to touch on Devin Booker again real quick. Like, I mean no means to discredit his finals. The 240-point games back to back. I thought he had a great finals. I just think that there's a couple flaws in his game. And when people in the media and on Twitter start evoking the name Kobe, I think that's where I
Yeah.
get a little bit like, yeah, Devin Booker's a hell of a player. He's a top 20 player in the NBA. He's an excellent player. He's an unbelievable, like, I love the way he talks and everything. Like, he's a guy you want to cheer for. It's amazing what he's been through with the Suns and the fact that they've been so anemic around him for so long. And so, honestly, I did want to say, like, he was still good in the finals and everything, but I think there is that missing in terms of him being elite at finishing at the rim and him being a truly lethal 3-point shooter. I think he's really just a mid 2-point jump shooter right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think the Kobe comparisons were very rich, and I think that happened all throughout the playoffs. I think it was Stephen A. Just honestly, just him. He said Donovan Mitchell is the best Jazz player ever, which is just a slap in the face to Karl Malone, who's won MVPs, or at least a MVP. I want to say two. Um,
And
and
Stockton.
yeah, and Stockton. Like, I agree. He'll definitely be better than Stockton. Because I didn't realize this, but Stockton's like most points ever was like 30 something, like 34, 30. I know it's a different era. He's a different player, more of an assist guy, more of a steals guy. I get that. And I'm not saying Mitchell's better than him now, because he's obviously not. But saying he's the best Jazz player ever is insane. That's just like a slap in the face to Malone. And then saying Booker's the next Kobe on his first run, where yeah, he was playing great, but I mean, it's Kobe Bryant. Come on, that's
It's it's really the fact that he has similarities to Kobe and Jordan in terms
yes,
of the mid-range game, and he gets more lift on his jump shot than the average person, and they got up pretty high on their jump shot. But then I feel like people forget what young DeMar DeRozan was. Young DeMar DeRozan had a pretty similar game. He still has it now. he just creates more space with his body than his athleticism now. But young DeMar DeRozan did have a game that you could say was mimicked after Kobe Bryant too.
Yeah, it's just I think that part of it, like people get mad, like, and I think it starts leading to people to dislike Booker because they're like, oh, is this guy's supposed to be the next Kobe? And it's completely
Mm-hmm.
unfair. It's like nothing he did wrong or anything. Yeah, I don't know. I just think those things are kind of detrimental to a player's development. But yeah, I'm with you on that. But I thought Booker played a good finals overall.
Me
Like
too. Me
you
too.
really can't ask. There was a couple of games that weren't good, but like, well, you can't expect him to just ball out every single night. And he had 240 burgers in his
Mm-hmm.
first game or his first finals ever. And I thought he was the best player on the court for the Suns this series. Like I think
By far.
he was the MVP. I know CP3 was there.
Well,
I still think Booker was the guy. This was
well,
yeah.
did you not know that CP3's leadership is what guided Booker to have those 240-point games?
True.
CP3's leadership is like one of those mythical things now. If CP3's leadership touches you, you will also become the next great player. No, I'm literally speaking tongue in cheek, but I'm with you. Booker was by far the Suns' best player in this finals.
Agreed. And then yeah, I think the Nets or not the Nets, the Suns overall put up a good fight. I am a little bit disappointed they dropped 4 in a row though, because like you think there'd be some resilience, but they didn't really face much on their path here. You know, a lot of people talk about the injured teams, and there is some truth to that. Now they did go 6 with the Clippers, but it was still without Kawhi, and I think most people expected them to win that when you knew Kawhi was donezo. So I think that was something that me and you were kind of waiting for. Like, what is this key team going to do to adversity when they do get punched in the mouth, and how are they going to respond? And well, they didn't respond all that great. It looks like. So yeah, I still think the Suns will be strong in the West for a few more years, but they have some interesting contracts ahead. That is
Yes,
something I will say. What they do with these contracts will be very interesting.
I agree. I agree. And I know we'll probably save it for another day to talk about DeAndre Ayton and what they should do, because I think that is one of the more interesting things about this offseason. And I know you have a lot to say about that, but I agree. What they do with DeAndre Ayton, when they have to pay Mikal Bridges, all these things, I think it becomes a question mark. And I did want to touch on Monty Williams before we transition. I know we
Mhm.
spent a lot of time on this, but I thought like Monty Williams, again, great coach, was his first finals, all of that. He's a really, really eloquent speaker. He's very impressive when he speaks. Like he's very inspiring, even if you're watching him on TV, as a deep voice and all of that. I thought you want to talk about a guy that didn't have a lot of adjustments with the Phoenix Suns. I didn't think he had an
Yeah.
adjustment once excuse me, Drew Holiday started picking Chris Paul up uh, uh, 94 feet and disrupting their offense. I didn't think he had an answer on what they were going to do offensively. And I still don't think they had a defensive answer. They didn't have a defensive answer for the Middleton Giannis pick and roll. They didn't have a defensive answer for Giannis's touches when he gets the ball, whether it's the high post, he gets the ball at the free throw line, he brings it up at the top of the key. They didn't have an answer. And to me, like, I still think the wall would have been effective against Giannis. I mean, we saw moments when the Nets were able to establish the wall with Blake Griffin, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, guys who aren't regarded as great defenders outside of Kevin Durant. That still affected Giannis. Like, there's still some parts of his game that are less than, and the Bucks aren't the best shooting team around him, though they shoot the ball well in the regular season. Unfortunately, even with Jay Crowder, Mikal Bridges, and DeAndre Ayton, 3 guys who seemingly are suited to build the wall, they never built the wall. So,
Yeah. They have the guys to do it. You have Jake
yeah,
Crowder, who did it last year. You have Ayton, who's just a mammoth of a person, and Bridges is also super lengthy too. They had the chance. I agree. They should have at least tried it. At the least, you know, you can't keep doing the same thing over and switch it up. Maybe they could have tried a zone. I know other teams have done that in the past. Maybe do that. And then my other thing too is I thought Campaign should have had more minutes. I thought he brought a different element with how he plays and his speed and how he can take people off the dribble because he's so quick, his first step, and how he works in the post game, and he can shoot pretty well too. So I thought they should have gone to him a little more. I think he only had 10 minutes in the last game. So yeah, I'm with you. I thought they could have done a few things better, of course, looking back at it, because they lost, but I liked campaign, and I really do think he should have got a little more burn.
I agree with you because I think their offense was just missing explosion in general. Whether it's explosion in terms of being able to score points in a hurry and explosion in terms of the pace they play. Like you can push the ball up the court, but Campaign pushes the ball up the court with the intent to get a good shot early and score. Chris Paul pushes up the court to play with pace. So I think there's two different things. Like Chris Paul pushes the ball up the court, but he's not looking to just, if it's a 1-on-2 situation, take the ball to the rack because he has a step. He'll still pull out and try to initiate your offense. Campaign, if he has a 2-on-2 fast break or 3-on-2 fast break, he's going straight to the rim. So I agree with you. And he scored, I think, 12? He really is the reason.
Scoring. I think he probably averaged like 8 or 9 a game, but I don't know. It just felt different when he was there because he just he's so fast. Like he was taking people off the dribble drive. And he just adds a different element. And I swear, every time he shoots, it looks like it's going in every time. I don't know why. I keep waiting for him to come back to earth.
But he Bulls campaign.
Oh, Bulls campaign was tough. Him and Bulls and Thunder campaign was better at dancing than playing basketball, it seemed. But he turned it around, and that was one of the better redemption arcs of the whole playoffs, I thought.
Yeah, agreed. And do you have anything else to add on the finals?
One thing here I wanted to put up, Cam Johnson was insane. Like, I was going to say the same thing. Every time he shot, it looked like I don't remember like a time he actually missed. And his shooting was great. He had that insane poster on PJ Tucker. Yeah, I mean, he played great, and I thought he should have got some more burn, to be honest with you. Like a forward as big as he is that can shoot well, doesn't need the ball in his hands, and he can play defense at a pretty good rate. He'll be a really good role player for an extended period.
And he challenges Nick Batum as possibly Jeff Van Gundy's favorite player in the NBA. Cam Johnson's one of those few players when he's on the floor, Jeff Van Gundy's no longer complaining about the refs. He's waxing poetically about how much he loves Cam Johnson.
I love both of them as well. I'm with Van Gundy on those, both of those guys.
Really good role players.
Definitely.
Before we move on, we had a couple questions. My man Jamal, he said Giannis's block on Ayton was his legendary moment. Then the lob and one on CP3. Giannis proved a lot of us wrong. Great show, guys. Thank you, Jamal.
Yeah, thank you, Jamal. And I think you're right because those both were insane. Like those will be shown on like highlight films forever. I think especially the block, just jumping off his bad knee as far as he did, tracking the ball, knowing that Ayton's one of the best like dunkers, and he's that. I mean, obviously he's a mammoth of a person, and that's what he's best at. So, yeah, I mean, he really just put his whole body on the line there and his livelihood. Because if he'd have got dunked on, you would have never heard the end of it, especially if they lost. But
right,
great point.
But he was willing to take that risk too. You have to appreciate that. I think him and Anthony Davis are probably the two most reckless people with their body on defense. They both throw their body. I mean, Anthony Davis probably in a basketball game, especially a high magnitude basketball game, takes like 5 or 6 unnecessary hits because he moves into rotation and takes a charge that 98% of other players won't take and stuff. Giannis is the same way. 900 out of 901 players give up on that play. It's a dunk to Ayton. Giannis finished the possession. It's one of the best blocks I've ever seen for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And then Noble Bulls asks top 5 quarterbacks in the league in 5 years. Also love your guys' show. Keep it up. We'll appreciate it, Noble Bulls. Blake, thoughts?
I wanted to throw out some names because I saw this and I was thinking about it. I think Mahomes will be there. I
Easy.
do. He's still young. Because that's it for me. Like the guys that are really good now, I don't know how good they'll be in 5 years. Like Rodgers and Brady, they will not be the top quarterbacks in 5 years. Same with guys like Russell Wilson when he's in his later 30s. I don't think he will be. So I'd say Mahomes. I'd say Josh Allen will definitely be there. I think Herbert's a guy who, looking at his start, he looks like he'll eventually take the leap. Some would say Trevor Lawrence because he is that blue chip prospect, that more generational talent quarterback. But I don't know. We haven't seen him play. But if he was there, I wouldn't be surprised. It seems like the last few times people have said these guys are a generational, the Elway, the Manning, the Luck, like those guys were at one point a top 5 quarterback, Manning and Elway for extended periods of time. So I would throw those 4 names. Do you have any? Maybe Lamar. I don't know.
Kyler,
Kyler,
Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson. There's a lot of people,
Jordan
man.
Love.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean,
Dak.
Dak will be there. I think he'll be in that conversation.
Yeah.
Trying to
For
think.
me, to
Maybe
me,
Burrow. Maybe Burrow.
oh, Burrow's definitely, if he's healthy, he's a guy that will be in that conversation for sure. I think, yeah. No, wait, Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, we don't
Yeah,
know if he'll even be playing or anything
that's true.
in
That's
that
true.
nature.
Yeah, but to me, it's a no. Like Mahomes, Josh
Let's cut down
Allen,
the list to 5. I'd say undoubtedly, in no order: Mahomes, Josh Allen, Herbert,
Deshaun Watson.
Watson.
Yeah, and then the 5th guy, I guess you could go with Trevor Lawrence. I still give Kyler Murray a shot because to me,
I'd
the
say
one thing he
Dak.
has to fix in his game, Dak has consistently been really
He'll be
good.
like 28, 29 at that point.
Dak will be like 32,
Is he
33.
27 already?
Yeah,
Wow. I guess
yeah, Dak's a little bit
he's on
older.
his second contract already. So yeah,
Yeah,
but
but
I still
yeah.
think he'll be in that conversation.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the conversation for 5, Lamar, Kyler, everybody comes in that conversation. But Trevor Lawrence, a lot of people, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, so many quarterbacks that are young, exciting, have potential. But to me, the 4 that I feel pretty good about are definitely Mahomes. I mean, Watson, if his legal stuff, if he plays, yeah, definitely. Josh Allen and Herbert. Those would be the 4 that I just look at and say, yeah, those guys will be there.
I would throw in Lawrence. My only concern, because I like Lamar and I like Kyler, if their legs start slowing down, will their passing become as good as some of these guys? Because that's what matters at the end of the day.
So
When they're 30, they're not going to be running for 800 yards. At least I don't think they will be. And if they do, like good for them. Yeah.
I think there is an aspect of it that's fair, but in terms of Lamar, I think we've seen growth in terms of him being
We
able to
have.
play from the pocket and make good decisions. It's just his accuracy at times, especially down the field, can be a little bit inconsistent, but he's shown that he's more than capable of sitting within the pocket and making good decisions from the pocket and throwing accurate passes. So I think with Lamar, it's really what do the Ravens do around him. Like I think at
Agreed.
some point they need to get better in terms of their passing game to help him evolve. Kyler, to me, the question with Kyler is just can he become a more consistent decision maker in terms of making the right decisions all the time. There's times where he chooses to run when he's got open receivers. There's times he doesn't see open receivers. So that to me is the question mark. But I think Kyler's also shown enough in terms of his ability to consistently throw the football accurately down the field, his consistency to carry an offense, all of that. So to me, he's got a chance. Then Dak, in terms of playing just good quarterback consistently, like making good decisions, making good throws, Dak's really good. There's more, right? Like Trey Lance with Shanahan, he's got an opportunity. Justin Fields and Zach Wilson have big potential. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence, he's the blue chip prospect. Burrow, and then as Brandon Vincent said, heck, the guy might still be in college.
I
Heck, he
wouldn't
might
be
still be in high
surprised,
school.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I agree with your top 4 though. I'm gonna throw in Lawrence as the 5th guy because whenever there's this generational guy, I feel like they do pan out. So I'm gonna throw him in there, and yeah. So again, my list: Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and who's the last guy?
Deshaun Watson.
Deshaun Watson. Yes.
You keep forgetting about Deshaun
Yes,
Watson.
I do.
Yeah, but yeah, I also think there's room for improvement. There's guys within the league that a lot could change, in 5 years, and could change in terms of if they get a better coach when they're 30 and stuff. And you might see them vault from, like, let's say Dak Prescott gets like a
The
Sean
next
McVay somehow. Yeah, let's say Dak Prescott is somehow paired with the next McVay. He will turn from a guy who's consistently in that 7 to 10 range or 7 to 12 range for everybody, that tier 2, really good quarterback, but not there, to, Dak Prescott's like the MVP in the NFL. Like, that's what kind of happened with Matt Ryan, though I would say Matt Ryan's maybe a little better at this point than Dak Prescott, not far off. I feel like we could have had that realization with Romo. Carson Palmer was a near MVP of football the moment he went with Bruce Arians and all of that. So
a lot of it does depend who you have coaching you.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's for sure. But that was a great question. Next question is from Brandon Vincent, and he says, which QBs are on the hot seat this year? I have a few that come to mind. I'm interested. I have a few. Who do you have, Vish, if you want to go first? Or if you want me to go
Tua Tagovailoa.
Really? You think?
He's 1. Drew Lock is 2. Daniel Jones is 3. Those are the 3. Actually, I would probably have Tua Tagovailoa 3rd, Drew Lock 2nd, Daniel Jones 1st. But to me, those are the 3 with Sam Darnold also in that conversation. Those are the guys I would say that are, yeah, definitely in terms of the hot seat. I mean, we can go through them, right? Tua, it's not just Tua. It's more that Burrow looked very good when he was healthy, and Herbert looks like something really special where there's a little bit of pressure. Miami does have a little bit of a win now roster, so there's pressure like that. Then not to mention their division is quite good when you have the Bills with Josh Allen. They're a really good team. I think New England's much improved. I think people are sleeping on New England with Cam. And then the Jets are seemingly getting better with Zach Wilson, Mike LaFleur, obviously Robert Saleh. So I think there's a little bit on Tua. Like, can he be that type of quarterback, especially when you look at the assets Miami has in terms of being able to make a move if Tua's not that guy, right? If Tua's not that guy, Miami doesn't have to be committed to him because Miami has the ability with the first-round picks they accumulated thanks to the Niners Trey Lance trade to be able to go up and get the quarterback that will end up being that guy. So there's pressure on him. Sam Darnold, obvious reasons, didn't work with the Jets. Everything looks really good around him in Carolina. Can you make it work?
Yeah.
Daniel Jones finally has a supporting cast, and his real big problem is that he turns the football over too much. And they have a good defense, and they have a good set of weapons around him with Galladay and Kadarius Toney and Saquon coming back, and their offensive line is better, so there's pressure on him like that. And then finally, Drew Lock, another team in Denver that's really, really stacked. And you look at it and you say, if the quarterback's better, Denver, we would all consider a playoff team because they have a good defense, good, solid offensive line, good set of weapons. And so I think there's a lot of pressure on it. Those are the 4.
My first one, Drew Lock. Don't need to really say much more. I think everyone knows why, especially the fact they brought in Bridgewater, saying they want someone who maybe is a bit better decision maker. Daniel Jones, I'm with you. Year 3, it's a make or break year. Either he's going to be really good, and he did have untapped potential that maybe the coaching staff or the team around him was failing, or maybe he is just super turnover prone, and that's just who he'll be, and you can't really advance super far with him. Tua, I disagree with. I know we were a little more critical of him than others. I think if he isn't good this year, all right, I think hot seat means if they're not good this year, they're gone. I think if Tua isn't good this year, then he will be on the hot seat. That's why I view his first year as kind of a scratch year. Like anything that looked good, like you'll run with it and take it. But I don't think the team's putting too much stock into how he did his first year, considering rehabbing, considering it was a weird COVID year. They didn't have the best weapons. Their O-line is okay, not great. So I disagree with Tua, and I really do think if he's not that good this year, then he will be on the hot seat. I know a couple people mentioned in the comments Kirk Cousins, and I thought this was a
That
really,
I
really great one, and it's one I actually kind of thought of too. Like,
Me too.
he's making a lot of money. They drafted Mond for a reason. There was a report that they attempted to trade up for Justin Fields. Now their offer wasn't great, but they're still thinking about quarterback, and they haven't. Kirk Cousins has been not what he was supposed to be. He was supposed to be the savior in Minnesota, and that's what a lot of people look at him as the guy who was supposed to come in, take him from NFC Championship game to the Super Bowl, and he hasn't. And I really do think if Kirk isn't the guy this year and they maybe go 500 or don't make the playoffs, there will be the hot seat for him and Zimmer, and they might clean house there. So yeah, I agree with most of those. I know someone said Matt Ryan. I don't see that.
You don't agree with Darnold?
I do agree with Darnold. That's right. I know. I think I want to say they took his 5th-year option. Correct. I believe they did take it.
Yes. Someone mentioned Wentz. I think they did take it. If somebody in the comments could confirm that, that would be great. Someone mentioned Wentz. I think Wentz has one more year.
Yeah, I
before
agree.
It becomes serious.
His like he can perform okay year 1 or whatever year 1.
Yeah, I think Carson Wentz's perception is on the hot seat, but I think given what the Colts have kind of invested in him and given his contract, I think that he's going to be afforded more than 1 year in Indianapolis. Like if he plays bad this year, I don't think things go crazy. I think he gets one more chance. Yeah, we mentioned Sam Darnold.
And then my other one, which kind of interesting. I guess it's not even that hot of a seat, but more of contract reasons is Roethlisberger. Like I would not be entirely surprised if he's gone after this year, and I still think he has something in the tank. I really do. Like when he needed to throw against the Browns, he was able to last year. I know they were playing prevent and all that, but his arm looked okay. Their O-line definitely isn't doing him any favors for someone who isn't mobile, but I think he's a guy that might really be on the hot seat.
Yeah, I think so. They did pick up Sam Darnold's 5th-year option. You were right about that. They did pick it up, and then I think there's other guys too that you can maybe go down the list and say like maybe a Taysom Hill or a Jameis Winston. Like if they don't show it this year, but then I wouldn't say those guys are like these guys that have started long enough where you would give him that shot. And then Goff, like I think Goff is already like on the seat. Like it's like Jimmy G a little bit in the sense that Goff is literally just bidding his time until Detroit. Like he's not the future of Detroit. When Detroit rebuilds this, I promise Jared Goff won't be the quarterback. But yeah, I was also thinking Cousins, honestly. Cousins was the one that really came to mind just because we know how much Grant loves Mond. So we've been exposed to Mond a decent amount. I personally like Mond. I wouldn't say I love Mond. I like Mond. But just the fact that I think next year Minnesota finally can move off of him. And so, like, I do think it becomes a point where, like you mentioned, they paid him and signed him with the expectation he would become that guy for them. And even though he's been really good for them, he's been something less than that guy that, can be that consistent top 10 quarterback. Yeah. So, yeah.
I wouldn't even say Goff's on the hot seat because, like, I wouldn't even say there is a seat. There's zero.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
There's zero expectation for him. Like, they're in a complete rebuild. I feel like you have to have some level of expectation and show something that, a team would seriously consider giving you a contract if yours was up tomorrow. But for someone like Drew Lock, he's had 2 seasons. He's only played, I think, 16, 17 games. But it's make or break. It's either you are the quarterback that you were taken to be in the second round, or you were just not. You were just a better prospect than you are an actual quarterback for NFL standards. And if you can't show it this year, then it looks like your time is up pretty much.
Agreed. And then a couple people mentioned Carr. I think Carr played good enough this year for him to not be on the hot seat. And then maybe some people are mentioning Jalen Hurds. My thing with Jalen Hurds, it goes back to they're not really committed to Jalen Hurds in the first place. Like they gave him the job like, oh, okay, Jalen Hurds can start this year. So he's literally in a he has a nothing to lose type situation. He can become their starting quarterback, but they're not going in with the expectations. Like Locke, Tua, Darnold, Daniel Jones, these other teams have built rosters around these guys where if they don't prove that they're the guy, they got to find another guy to go win. Like there's no other excuse. Philadelphia
Yeah.
doesn't have that problem.
Yeah, I mean, like if they go like 4-13, I don't think Eagles fans would really be mad. The front office wouldn't be pounding on the table saying we need to trade everything for a quarterback. No, I think their roster is pretty bare bones, and I think that's kind of the main point we're trying to drive on with the hot seat. If you have a hot seat, it's because you have expectations and you're either not meeting them or you're not progressing to what you should be by the perception of the front office. Like I think Hurts and Wentz, like I mean Wentz to a lesser extent, but like someone like Hurts and Goff, like the team is not expecting you to go out and win double-digit games, like not even in the slightest bit. So as long as you're not like performing at an all-time horrible level and you're showing something of good, then yeah, I think you're not on the hot seat.
And there's no question about whether like the team isn't the team isn't committed to you from the standpoint where like, oh, if you don't perform, it's over for them. Like the Giants are fully invested in Daniel Jones.
Yes.
And they've built a roster around Daniel Jones. And if it doesn't work, then the Giants are screwed. And so Daniel Jones has to perform this year. Same thing with Sam Darnold. Tua to a lesser extent, but similar idea. Locke, they got Teddy Two Gloves, but Teddy Two Gloves isn't the future for anybody. Right? They built a roster with the idea that Drew Lock would be the future. They basically got an insurance policy in Teddy Two Gloves, but he's not like, like a guy that changes this entire conversation. People like Goff, like tomorrow, if Goff doesn't perform, I don't think the Lions are really going to be sweating it or like, oh crap, Goff didn't perform. Similar thing with Jalen Hurts. Tomorrow, if Jalen Hurts doesn't perform, nobody's going to be sitting here like, wow, can you believe it? Jalen Hurts, like, it didn't work out, all of that. It'll just be like, yeah, Jalen Hurts didn't perform. Eagles roster isn't good, and they'll move on and continue to rebuild.
Agreed. So this was so thank you, Desert Plants, for the $2. Much appreciated. So Desert Plants asks, Hurd seems overhyped, not that great of an athlete.
Who are we talking about? Jalen Hurd?
I believe Jalen Hurd, yes. I've not seen much of Jalen Hurd. So I'm gonna defer to Vish on this one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know if he's talking about Jalen Hurd because Jalen Hurd is a hell of an athlete. Is he a little bit overhyped? Maybe at this point, because the expectation of a guy coming off a broken back and a torn ACL, he's going to come back and win and contribute as the Niners' number 3 receiver job. I would be shocked if he comes back healthy and is able to make the roster and all of that. I mean, he's coming off 2 very serious injuries. So I would say he's overhyped from that standpoint. Not that great of an athlete. Maybe now, I don't know. But last time we saw him before he got injured when he came out of the draft, he's a hell of an athlete. He's an incredible athlete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I honestly do not have much. I originally read it as Hurts.
I was thinking Hurts, but then the next statement doesn't line up. The next statement doesn't line up. Like, not that great of an athlete. Jalen Hurts is a phenomenal athlete.
That's his best attribute, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess he meant Jalen Hurd. I do not have much to say. I know he was injured. Grant posted a video about his recovery. That's the only reason I knew he was hurt. But as far as I remembered, he was a good athlete. In the little bit I did know about him. So Desert Plants did reply talking about Jalen Hurd. His numbers weren't great at pro day. Slow 40 and burst. I thought he struggled with separation at camp.
I mean, did you watch him in camp? Because I didn't see the camp practices, but I watched him coming out of Baylor, obviously, because he came to the 49ers. He ran a 4.6, which for a 6'5", 233 guy isn't slow. It's pretty moving. And he, in terms of his lateral movement and change of direction, that's what made him a very special athlete. You don't see many 6'5", 230 guys be able to drop their hips and change direction the way he did. I mean, Blake, no, 6'5", 225 Marquez Valdez-Scantling is not the
He's
best
like
at being able to change
6'3",
direction.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
in terms of
no.
struggling with separation, he was a college running back. He played receiver for 1 year. So he's not the most refined route runner, but he has the tools and attributes to become a good, or he had the tools and attributes to become a good route runner. No clue now with him going through first a spinal injury and then a torn ACL.
Yeah, and I think it's almost become like if you're 6'5" and 4'6", that used to be like the normal, right? But then we see the Calvins, we see DK, we see other guys that are like 6'4" and they run like a 4.38 or a 4.4, low 4.4, and it's like,
Josh Gordon.
wow, that's insane. Like these guys are freaks, but yeah, I guess those guys don't grow on trees for a reason. But yeah, I
Weird.
mean, it is a
My
little
bad, Joe.
slower. It is a little slower on the end. I do agree with that part a bit. Like you maybe wish it was in the 4.55s or something. But yeah, I don't know. He is a big dude.
I do want to say something, just random fact. When he said Hurd, not that great of an athlete, I thought he was talking about Sam Hurd. Do you remember the former Cowboys receiver then went to the Bears? The guy who got like arrested for selling things. You remember him, Sam Hurd? Good special teamer.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, well,
It does sound
that guy
familiar.
wasn't that great of an athlete, and he was the guy who had a big arrest because he was selling certain things that you shouldn't be selling in
Yeah,
the NFL.
that'll
Yeah,
happen. But thank you for the donation and the question.
yeah.
And then one more from Brandon Vincent. Thank you again for donating. Brandon Vincent's question was, what does Cam Akers' injury mean for the Los Angeles Rams season? We haven't talked about this yet, so this is actually, I guess, a good way to get into the topic. But I'll have you go first, Vish, because I think we'll have different answers for this one.
Okay, is it an end-all, be-all? No. Was it a massive impact? Yes. I'm someone who believed that Cam Akers was going to be in the conversation for one of the 6 or 7 best running backs in the NFL by the end of this year. I love the end of his rookie season. I think he's a terrific I thought he was a terrific runner, great contact balance, powerful, better speed and burst than people give him credit for, good receiver. And I thought, like, honestly, when I looked at the Rams offense, obviously everybody knows how I feel about Matthew Stafford. Everybody, like, I love Matthew Stafford. And I think McVay's a hell of a coach. I was excited for the fact that I thought the Rams were going to be able to get back to running the football, something that they've been very inconsistent with doing since Todd Gurley, CJ Henderson in that playoff run. And so I think it's going to affect them a bit. I think Darrell Henderson is a good backup running back. I think he would be okay as a starter, definitely not as good as Akers. So it's definitely going to affect them.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean for their season's prospects? Well, we'll see, because honestly, to be fair, and even though I had these thoughts on what their offense could be like, we didn't get to see what the plan was in terms of how their offense was going to look. We don't know how much of a focal point Akers was, though I personally am assuming he was a large focal point.
Yeah.
I don't think we can say that, oh, this changes. Like, they can't win the Super Bowl now without Akers. He's not Aaron Donald or Matthew Stafford or Jalen Ramsey. But I do think it's a big loss. I thought he was going to really become a hell of a player this year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, we made a video saying how good we think Cam Akers is going to be. We both agreed on that. But my thing is this: Henderson played good enough to where you're confident with him going out there. We've seen in the past. Do you remember when Todd Gurley was having one of his great seasons? He got injured. It was during the Super Bowl run in 2018. They signed C.J. Anderson off the street, and in 5 games, he had 500 yards.
Yeah, he ran all over my Niners.
He did. C.J. Henderson off of the streets. I know how good running backs can be. I've seen Adrian Peterson kill my team. I've seen other guys run all over my team. I saw Raheem Mostert drop 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. Dalvin Cook. All I'll say is this: they are going to miss Cam Akers, but the bottom line is just you don't need a running back to go far. And you mentioned it. If they were to lose Donald, and even when he was injured against the Packers, he wasn't very effective. If they lost Ramsey, Stafford. I would even argue someone like Woods or Cup could be of more value to them just because of what they do. Um, I still think they can go far. Now, yeah, they're gonna miss him because Henderson might not be as good as he is, and I don't think he is. I don't think he's as big and as strong, and maybe he can't run in between the tackles. But listen, there is a lot of good. I wouldn't say good, but serviceable running backs that are still on the open market. Maybe Todd Gurley wants to come back for a reunion. Adrian Peterson is still there and still runs as hard as he possibly can. And I still think he'll do that for the next 3 years because he seems to be ageless. But there's a ton of other running backs too, and I know they drafted his last name's Funk in the 7th round, which is pretty cool. And they have another guy who's I think first or second year who might have been undrafted, or they drafted him on a later round. So I'm not really that worried about the running back position. I think McVay would be fine with a running back by committee. They kind of had that last year. They didn't have it with Gurley, but Gurley also looked and had one of the greatest stretches ever for any running back. So I'm not frankly too concerned. Yeah, it is tough because I mean Cam Akers is special, and I really do think he could have had a breakout year compared to how he's viewed by the national media. But I still think they can go far, and their offense will hurt, but it'll still be a good unit because they have Stafford, they have McVay, they have a good receiving core, solid enough O-line.
Yeah, I ultimately agree with the conclusion too. Like, I think it is a loss, right? Just because you and I both, again, thought that Akers would be in the conversation for like the 6 or 7 or 8 best running
Yeah.
backs in the NFL. Like, we thought very highly of Akers. You can go see our channel. There's 2 or 3 videos where we talk about how much of a star he's going to, in our opinion, he was going to be. But I'm with the conclusion that, like, yeah, it affects them. It's not changing who they're going to be in terms of their
Mhm.
prospects this season. Like, if they're going to be a Super Bowl team, they will be a Super Bowl team with or without Cam Akers, right? Like,
Yeah,
if
like
they don't make the Super Bowl,
he's not
yeah,
gonna be the difference between them, missing
missing
the
and making the
playoffs and
playoffs.
them playing in February, right?
Right, absolutely.
But yeah, I do think it comes down to it being a bummer because their offense has the potential to be top 5 unit this year. And with him, I think those chances are a lot better. Now, if they're the 5th best unit or 5th highest scoring versus the 9th, like that's a marginal difference at the end of the day, right? So it's a bummer. That's undoubtedly. But that is a good question, Brandon.
Yeah,
And thanks for, I guess, getting Vish and I to talk about it because I don't think we works. It's been a couple days, I believe.
yeah. I actually saw this news, but for whatever reason, I forgot to say, like, we should talk about it. So thanks for
Yeah.
asking the question. Otherwise, we'd have forgotten.
Hmm. So we've answered a few questions for a little bit here, but we did have a couple more NBA stuff or NBA topics to get to. Um, and the first one kind of relates to what Giannis said, and basically, in the presser, he called out the super teams, and he said, it's easy to join a super team and win. He took the hard way, and I guess I would imagine probably a lot more fulfilling, although it's fulfilling regardless. You're a world champion. But Vish, did you think that this was unnecessary, called for? Do you agree with it? What are your thoughts on this?
I, look. I think there's an aspect of it that's cool, right? Giannis failed twice miserably with the Bucks, where he had playoff performances that, after being the league MVP, it looked ugly because there were moments where he wasn't making free throws. He was struggling to do anything when he wasn't able to get to the rim. Like, it looked like, wow, he's getting totally exposed. So, like, in a sense, I get what he's saying. For him to come back this year stronger and win with Milwaukee, yeah, it's a tough road. Like, it would have been easier for him to go to a new place, but I don't think it always tells the entire story, right? Like, I guess the immediate example everybody immediately goes to with this is LeBron leaving Cleveland. Well, the one thing the Bucks proved to Giannis that the Cleveland Cavaliers never proved to LeBron James was that they were committed to winning. The Bucks did every single thing that a small market team could do to win, right? They paid Chris Middleton the max. They traded for and paid Drew Holiday the max. They paid Brooke Lopez a hefty sum of money. They did all of these things for Giannis, right, to show they were committed to winning. LeBron was playing with Larry Hughes, Mo Williams, Delonte West,
Ruby Gibson.
Zydrunas Ilgauskas, Boobie Gibson, and Dan Gilbert was never showing LeBron that he was committed to winning, which is why LeBron needed to win and go to an organization that was committed to winning. Now, you could say it's the easy way out, but I do think it is difficult when you're a player as big as LeBron to go establish a new culture and a new way of playing basketball, which he had to do in Miami. I would say Miami's the place that LeBron probably fit a system the most in his career. Like, he didn't play the LeBron basketball of he brings the ball up the floor and decides what the offense is going to do and dictates as much. They did have a lot of people handle the ball and have LeBron play out of the post. If you remember, LeBron's post game in Miami was mean. LeBron was really good. So all those things, I guess I understand what Giannis is saying. I don't think it's 100% true. I don't think it's 100% fair because teams have also given their athletes the easy way out. Like, we talk about super teams and stuff, but super teams were organically built in the NBA. I mean, you look at the Showtime Lakers, talk about a super team. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you're talking about Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, two guys who are universally accepted as two of the top 5 players, not just in the NBA at the time, of all time.
Yeah.
Right. And two that are considered widely as the two greatest players in their position. James Worthy. You had Jamal Wilkes, who averaged 20 points a game. You had Bob McAdoo, who's a former MVP. Michael Cooper was a defensive player of the year. Byron Scott. You can go down the list. That's a super team. Then you look at the Bird Celtics with Bird, McHale, Parrish, Danny Ainge, and they had Cedric Maxwell, who did win Finals MVP the first year when Bird had 2 Finals games with 9 points a game. Nobody ever mentions that. That was a super team. The Bad Boy Pistons technically were a super team when you go down their roster with obviously Isaiah, Dumars, Lambeer, Rick Mahorn, and they got Mark Aguirre too. That is a super team.
That's
Jordan,
I'd say.
Maybe. I feel like if you go the fact that they had.
I think Giannis defines super team as players like deliberately teaming up instead of like, I'd say like the Pistons were more homegrown than say like those Heat teams. Would you disagree with that?
Sure, that's fair, but they don't get Mark Aguirre unless Mark Aguirre is tight with Isaiah Thomas, which he was. Which is where, like, there's still an aspect of teaming up, right? Like, Michael Jordan did recruit.
Yeah,
Michael Jordan did admit on The Last Dance that he recruited a 6-time All NBA first team defense, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 2-time All NBA third team, 2-time All Star basketball player to his team, and Dennis Rodman. So, like, there is an aspect of the recruiting is still existing, and so, like, I kind of buy Giannis's statement, but then at the end of the day, like, Giannis, sure, you took the hard way out, and I agree with that, but you also had a couple of things go right for you to take the hard way and have it work out, right? Like Kyrie Irving having to get hurt, James Harden having to get hurt. And honestly, like, the Suns put up a good fight. Giannis had a historic finals. I personally doubt if Kawhi Leonard or Anthony Davis don't get injured, whether the Suns win either of those series. If Anthony Davis doesn't get injured, I don't think the Suns beat the Lakers. I definitely don't think they beat the Clippers if Kawhi Leonard is healthy. So.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I understand why I think he said it, because if you remember prior to signing with Milwaukee, and when he did, people said Giannis will never win a super. Then they said, he's literally just going here to waste his career. You'll never get it done, and all that. So yeah, I mean, I understand the point, but I think you brought it up too, and like, I think one of the reasons maybe people like are surprised at this is, I feel like people have called it a Mickey Mouse ring or a lesser ring because of the injuries. Now, I don't know if I'd say that, but yeah, I felt like generally speaking, like there's been way better teams than this Suns and Bucks team. Just generally speaking, like I feel like most of LeBron's teams, bar the last few Cavs teams, were just on a different level almost. And those Spurs teams and the Warriors, I mean, the 2016 Cavs, the 2015 healthy Cavs, and
Do you think so?
I think those Warriors teams would have absolutely
Yeah.
wiped the floor with these teams.
Wait. I have a question because I agree on the Heat. I agree on the Spurs. I agree definitely on the Warriors. I'm not actually 100% sure on the Cavs.
I think some of those Cavs teams would have. I don't know about the one where they had Kyle Korver on the promo, but when they had Kevin Love,
No,
Kyrie, and LeBron,
but
yeah, I really
if
do.
you're but that's also because of how great LeBron was during that period of
Well,
time.
yeah,
Like if you're
yeah.
but if you're stacking up these rosters head to head, like when you go Tucker, Connaughton as your role players, maybe you take JR. You're definitely not taking Shump. You're not taking Darren Williams. You're not
Yeah, but
taking Derek Williams.
I'm just saying the fact that I think those teams would probably have made it. I mean, you saw what LeBron did in the
Yeah.
East. It
Oh,
was a
you're
cakewalk
saying they
through.
would beat this Bucks team?
Yeah, I'd say they would.
Oh, I agree. I
I'm not
agree that
saying
they
like
would beat this Bucks
top to
team, but
bottom.
yeah, okay, fair enough. My bad.
Oh
I
yeah, all I'm
misunderstood.
saying
Yeah.
is like I feel like these two teams, when you compare them to like other teams that have won this decade, they would be closer to the bottom. And then I guess people's counter to that would say, well, what about Chris Middleton? He's an all-star. What about Drew Holiday? He's an all-star. Well, then I'm starting to think, okay, how do you define a super team then? Because if you have three all-stars, isn't that technically a super team? And I guess you would say, well, it's homegrown, and well, they traded for Drew, and yeah, it is homegrown. But I guess how do you define super team is my question, because last year's Lakers team was not a super team. Kentavious
Yeah,
Caldwell-Pope
right.
is the third player. That is
Yeah.
not a super team. So yeah, that's where like I get why he said it, but at what point? Because everyone now is saying, well, Chris Middleton needs respect. These guys are all stars. Giannis, two-time MVP. Well, how do you define super team? Because by those standards, is this Bucks team not a super team? That's what I would ask. Because
I
I
think
wouldn't
people
say
say
it
by
is.
superstars. Yeah, I think people say by superstars, but then yeah, Jamal brings up the perfect point. The Shaq Kobe Lakers
Yeah,
literally had two players. They had two players. It was Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant. Now they were two of the three best players in the NBA with Duncan, but the rest of those guys, like it was not a good top to bottom roster. And veteran role players really make an impact in the playoffs. The Clippers are the perfect example. How much of an impact did Reggie Jackson, Nick Batum, Marcus Morris, these higher level veteran role player plus guys make for them? Massive differences. For the Bucks, Pat Connaughton, PJ Tucker, these type guys, Brooke Lopez, they made huge. I mean, Brooke Lopez had 30 points in an all important game 5 versus the Hawks without Giannis. So those guys made a massive difference. I'm 100% with you
Bobby
there. And
Portis.
right. And he had 17 last night. And if we're talking honestly, if we're talking about super teams, and if you say the Lakers are a super team, then the 2019 Raptors have to be a super team too. Sure, they had one
Yeah,
so-called superstar in Kawhi Leonard, but they had like 6 guys who've made all defensive teams, and Siakam and Lowry and Fred VanVleet, and you go down the list with Ibaka and Marcus Gasol. There's so many really good players. So I agree. I actually agree with you, and I actually missed that point totally. Like you're 100% right. I don't know what
this
a super yeah.
this is what I would say. So whether it's two top five or maybe like the Nets where it's like two top five, you could argue, and then Kyrie who's like a top 15. Because like I guess I'm starting to realize what qualifies as a super team. Like that's my question because it doesn't seem like anyone could give you like a objective definitive answer.
Yeah,
And that's where I'm like, you could make the case that this Bucks team was a super team. If you have three all-star caliber players and one of them being an MVP, like how could like I could make a strong argument that that's a super.
yeah. So let me ask you this then. I'll say my super teams that I think of my lifetime that I can remember. I think the Celtics, the '07 Celtics,
Yep,
when they
I
got
agree.
Pierce, Garnett, Ray Allen, that was a super team. I think the Miami Heat through that run, they were a super team. I do think there's an aspect of me. It's really tough to quantify with the Spurs because they all don't play enough minutes to have their counting stats up. But when Kawhi Leonard developed in 2014 and Tony Parker was still playing pretty good basketball, Tim Duncan was still playing pretty good basketball, I think they were right on the cusp. But I wouldn't say they were like a super team the way the Heat and the Celtics, and then finally the Warriors. the KD Warriors were without a doubt a super team. Those would be the three that I personally would call a super team in my life. Like those would be the three.
I think it has to be three. Like you can't just have like Kobe and Shaq wouldn't be under that. Jordan
Jordan and Pippen is never considered a super team, but both Jordan and Pippen were top 10 players. Like Jordan was the best player, and Pippen was a top 10 player in the 90s. So
he was like a top 7. He
yeah,
went to the conference finals when Jordan left and all that. So yeah, I'm with you. That to me is like, what do you quantify as a super team? Because I would agree with you. Heatles, that Celtics team, obviously the KD Warriors. But would you say, I wouldn't say the Cavs, the LeBron Cavs were like, Kevin Love was pretty good, but he wasn't like a few of the years he was pretty good. I think towards the end he fell off a little bit, but like I wouldn't say that's a super team, you know.
Like Did Jen makes a great point. I did want to mention this. Yeah, a super team is definitely not a bad thing. Like we went through it. I went through a long thing at the beginning about how many super teams there have been in NBA history. But the LeBron Cavs to me are one of those teams that people I think look back and say they were a super team, mostly because Kyrie Irving was historic in both finals.
Yeah.
He was in the 2016 finals and the 2017 finals when they lost in 5. Kyrie Irving played like insanely good basketball, but Kyrie Irving at the time was never considered like a top 10 player. Like I personally think Dwayne Wade in 2011 was a better basketball player than Kyrie Irving was throughout the entire time he played with LeBron and the Cavs. And I think Anthony Davis the last 2 years is just better than Kyrie Irving was at any point he played with LeBron and the Cavs too. That's just my personal opinion about it as individual basketball players.
Yeah, it's just like when Kyrie drops 40 twice in that Warriors series in the finals, and it's like you can't do better than this as a second option. Yeah, I get that, but it's hard. I guess it's hard to quantify what a super team for me is, but I understand why he said it. And yeah, I mean, he does have a point. Like it probably like just in a vacuum, like he would probably feel more fulfillment winning the way he did than say Kevin Durant did by going to the team that he lost to and then winning, which like is kind of insane seeing a top 3 player leave.
Yeah.
That already had the best record in the history of the league in the regular season.
But then Kevin Durant's argument is imagine when Kevin Durant's 26 years old, if suddenly they're playing the Spurs in the championship and instead of him and Russ getting hurt every other year, Tim Duncan gets injured. Or sorry, Tony Parker gets injured, Manu Ginobili gets injured, Kawhi Leonard is not Kawhi Leonard, and it's just Tim Duncan and nobody in a 7-game series. Like I think Kevin Durant would look at it and say, then you look in the East, LeBron gets injured, maybe Dwayne Wade gets injured too, Paul George gets injured for the Pacers, and he goes through the finals like that. I'm sure Kevin Durant looks at it and say, I would have won with OKC in that sort of situation as well. And technically he would have taken the hard route to do it.
Yeah. Tough to say, but long-winded answer, I guess. My definition of super team, I'd say like 2 like top 10 players, and then probably another guy would qualify. So that would make all the teams you kind of mentioned as a super team. And then I understand why Giannis said it, and I don't blame him because he was doubted heavily. The whole team slandered Chris Middleton.
Yeah, and Giannis,
Holiday, Bud. All of the whole shebang. They all got
100%. They deserve 100% of the credit. You're right. What they achieved was phenomenal. Everything we said, while it's great to have this conversation, it doesn't change the fact that the Milwaukee Bucks are the 2021 NBA champions. Giannis had one of the greatest finals of all time. He had the greatest, in my opinion, closing game to a finals. So yeah, 100%. I agree with that. And real quick, Blake, if you don't mind, I did want to touch on the conversation that's going on in the comments right now in regards to the KD Warriors. I want to also get your take on this. Like, I don't think that just because you draft a team, it doesn't mean that it isn't a super team. Like the Lakers technically were organically built. They drafted Magic Johnson. They drafted James Worthy. And they only signed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That doesn't change the fact that they had 3 of the 15 best players in the NBA. Like,
Yeah.
Sure, the Warriors organically built it, but they also recruited. Like I tweeted about this earlier. Like everybody gets on Kevin Durant for going to the Warriors, and they call him taking the easy way route. Technically, the Warriors also recruited Kevin Durant. It wasn't just like Kevin Durant called them and said, "I want to go to the Warriors." The Warriors technically took the easy way route, quote unquote, by recruiting Kevin Durant, and they don't get criticism for it, which is why I don't think Kevin Durant should really get criticism for it. It kind of sucks
Mhm.
to watch a player of his caliber go to the Warriors, but at the same time, like you can understand why he would end up going there. And I think Jen is on it. They were ultimately a super team by like without a doubt.
I mean, I kind of disagree. Like, the goal of a team is to just get the best players you can. And if you're, Steph Curry or you're Jordan or you're LeBron and you have the chance to get someone of that caliber, like why would you'd be a fool not to call them? Like you would just be a plain idiot. But I think it's more telling like that KD being viewed as some called him the best, most regarded him as the second or third best, going to a team that beat you three when you were up 3-1 and leaving, I guess, a team that you were the MVP, you said you wanted to be there and all of that. That's where I think the criticism comes in because if you are that level of player, like you shouldn't like go to that type of a team and go to the team that beat you. You should want to come back for hungry. And maybe that's unrealistic expectations, but I wouldn't blame any of the like I wouldn't blame Bob Myers for saying, "Hey, let's get Kevin Durant." Like, why would you not do that?
Yeah, but then at the same time, like if a team like that is recruiting Kevin Durant, like how do you? It goes two ways, right? Like
In a
why is it?
sense, yeah.
Because technically, like we look at it only from the players, right? We don't really take the organizational perspective into account. We call like Mark Espinoza has been calling teaming up, superstars teaming up is a super team. Well, it takes two to tango to team up. Like Kevin Durant didn't just show up and sign with the Warriors. The Warriors teamed up with Kevin Durant too. That's why Iguodala, Clay, Steph, and Draymond all went to the Hamptons to recruit him. They wanted to team up with him as well. It wasn't just that Kevin Durant went to them and teamed up with them, right? So
Yeah,
why is it only Kevin Durant that gets criticized for going and taking the easy way route? Because technically, if you're going to call it the easy way route, they all took the easy way route by trying to get Kevin Durant. They had just lost the finals too.
I think a lot of people validate him by the fact that they had one before Kevin Durant got there, though.
True. That's fair.
That's the main argument for why, because like for KD, he hadn't won before, and so it was like a big thing getting his first ring. But Steph, Clay, Draymond, and Iggy all had a ring, and they'd made the finals before. Now, would they have been able to beat LeBron's Cavs without him? That's we don't know. But yeah, I think the main reason why is because they had won a ring and they had been there before and they'd been to the finals twice. But I do think it is a fair point, like Draymond in the parking lot calling Kevin Durant saying we need you is like kind of doesn't get talked about at all. And it is
Yeah, it's
kind
a
of
little extra.
it is pretty incredible that like a team of that caliber was so desperate for KD. And I think it shows how much they feared LeBron and Kyrie and them because no lead is safe apparently.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is, to be honest. I didn't want to turn this into like a Kevin Durant, LeBron, Steph, that type conversation, because those type of conversations can get toxic really fast. It was more, I think the conversation about the super team is really interesting. I
Mhm.
personally I'm somewhat indifferent to it, honestly. Like there's aspects of it that I don't like. At the same time, there's aspects of it. I'm just like, at some point, we can't be hypocrites about it. If we're gonna have a certain opinion about it, we have to have that opinion all the way. It can't just be that we criticize Kevin Durant and everybody else. It's okay with and justify what everybody else did when.
Mhm. Agreed. And then did you want to do the final topic or should we just wrap it up? It's been an hour and a half.
Yeah, it's been an hour and a half. I'm ready to wrap it up. There's
Yeah.
going to be a lot of time to talk CP3
We'll talk
legacy.
CP.
So,
Yeah, I'll say we were going to talk about CP3's legacy, but it's been a while. I think we're going to get Nolan on to talk about that because Nolan is one of the
yeah,
biggest CP3 fans. we're gonna talk about the Lakers and how they might want to add CP3 or Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, real
And
quick.
then I think CP3 would be the guy. I wouldn't say it's. I don't know if
I
it'd be
mean,
a super team. I wouldn't
it,
consider. I don't know. I'd have
no,
to
I would not consider it to be a super team. I think that Chris Paul, like, oh my God, the things that have been said about Chris Paul this year has just it's gotten reckless to a point where I think when Noel's on, also only because I think it'll be a fun topic, we should also do the conversation about is Chris Paul even a top 5 point guard in the NBA? I think you and I would very much
Yeah.
disagree with that statement. We know how Noel feels about Chris Paul, but yeah, I don't think it would be a super team. 37-year-old Chris Paul is still a hell of a basketball player, but now we're starting to deify things that he is doing. When the Suns last year, DeAndre Ayton also got suspended for 40 games, which had to do with why they were a bad team. It wasn't just they added
Not
Chris
at all.
Paul. And look, Chris Paul just turned them he turned water into wine.
Dude, don't forget, from China to the NBA campaign, one of the best redemption arcs I've ever seen. One of the best.
Chris Paul did that though. Not Monty Williams, not James Jones who
Sure.
signed him, not the fact that he showed them something in the bubble. Chris Paul taught Campaign how to play basketball. He taught him how to dribble the ball with both his right and left hand.
And how to shoot efficiently. Definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'll wrap up this episode. So make sure to like, subscribe, share with friends who might be interested in our content. And we'll stream again in the near future, and look out for individual clips if you missed some of it, so that you can, catch up on all the topics, long-winded topics that we touched on. So yeah, thank you guys.